You're tuned into the Believe in Bengals show with Solomon Wilcots and Adam Pac-Man Jones.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Believe in Bengal podcast delivered by 828 Logistics. Solomon Wilcots. And we have a very special guest. That's right. Three-time Super Bowl champion himself, linebacker and special team ace with the Patriots, the Rams, as well as the Jets. Matt Chatham joins us on the Believe in Bengal podcast. Matt, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Life's good. Got an early game this week. It's Saturday, so we get early football. Can't wait.
Absolutely. Look, before we get to the upcoming matchup between the Cincinnati Bengals and the New England Patriots to be played on Saturday, as you just mentioned, I want to go back to last week's game because the Bengals came back against one of the great quarterbacks, the greatest quarterback in NFL history, your former teammate, Tom Brady, down 17 points. The Bengals came back and scored 34 unanswered points in the second half to win that game. What do you think that does for a young team like Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals after coming back in a game like that?
So, Solomon, I think my best point of reference on this actually isn't as the Patriots, it's more as the Jets. In that 06 season, you're a new team. Coach Mangini's brought us all in there to try to do some sort of facsimile, I guess, of what the Patriots do. And we get an in-season win on the road against them. Ends up being the last grass game, and Gillette forces them to sort of scramble and put turf down the next week. But I just recall, obviously him being my teammate, old roommate. I knew Tom well, and especially from practices and all those kind of things, what it's like to compete against him day in, day out. But it definitely means something to guys who aren't as familiar with him. Guys who he's that figure, he's that league figurehead type. And when you go out and battle and it's close, or in this instance you reference where you're actually trailing and have to come back, it puts juice in a locker room. It's a murmur around the room from young guys to older guys who've not had that kind of success yet to say, we can do this, right? It's sort of, it's a one-man validation, right? It's the Bucs you're beating, but to compete against that particular dude and to come out on top, it really gives a lot of confidence to a group that's trying to go somewhere.
And to your point, look, you know Tom well. I've met him and interviewed him on so many occasions. You're not going to meet someone who's better than he is in terms of being a first-class guy. I always call him a servant leader. He's there to serve the other guys and not everyone to serve him. I thought he was so gracious after the game. You know that loss hurt him as much as anything, but he's signing autograph for Bengals players. He's shaking the hands and spending time with Bengals players. It's probably the only time we're going to see a Joe Burrow, Tom Brady matchup. What do you think it did for someone like a Joe Burrow? Was this kind of signifying a passing of the torch for many of us watching Brady and Burrow in that kind of game?
It makes me – I hesitate to go here, obviously, because you all know what happened last offseason where we felt like the farewell tour had happened and then Tom comes back and does it again. But I do think when you get to this sort of – Tom's not in an 18th or 19th hole. He's in like 26th hole. Right?
That's right.
But I think you become more sort of sensitive to graciousness. Mm-hmm. I think you look around and you understand a little better what you've just been a part of, sort of what you've left behind. And you appreciate other guys who are out there that are dogs like you were. And I think it's interesting to see guys like that interact, especially when Tom says, you know what, to a certain extent, I can only control my position, and circumstances have changed dramatically so on the team I'm on. But it's a good thing for me. It's a good thing that I'm going to be remembering for the next 10, 20 years as I leave and do other things. Yeah. That, you know what, I had a connection with some of these other guys that did it at the highest level behind me.
Yeah. I think what this signifies for me, the Bengals coming back the way that they did, and coming back against a team led by Tom Brady, because I don't think you could separate the two. Remember, the Bengals are a young franchise, or at least a young team led by a young quarterback in Joe Burrow, who's still finding their way. And I think from last year to even now, around the league, from people on the outside looking in, they kind of see this team, an organization that arrived maybe ahead of schedule, surprising everyone in the AFC. You don't just arbitrarily beat Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes at Arrowhead. We all know that could be a tough place to play. And now as we get here, they've beaten them 3 straight times. And I just think for even everyone who are Bengals fans, they're a little shocked and surprised. And I think a win like what we saw last week, Matt, it kind of tells you and I, we've been around football all of our lives. when you can win games like that, when no one else expects it, and it looks like you're about to go down for the count, and yet you snatch victory from the jaws of defeat and walk out of there, it does wonders for our confidence as players. You know that. And now it really does start to build on itself, because anything the coaches tell you, now you believe them. Now you buy in. And now you begin to believe that you can do anything after a win like that. And I think it's like a shot in the arm for the Cincinnati Bengals team, having won against Tom Brady, having come from behind against a Buccaneers team that just won a Super Bowl 2 years ago. And now they're getting ready to take on the big bad Patriots. And I think they go into these final 3 games with a sense of understanding that we can do anything, and that this may even be a better team than they were 1 year ago at this time.
Yeah, I think there's a big misperception, sort of collectively on our NFL sort of circle of what it takes to be a champion and what happens when you actually become one. The notion that you just fly through a season because you're markedly better from the 17 that you play, that isn't how it works. I mean, there's 6, 7, 8 games where, your metaphor there, the notion of sort of taking victory from the jaws of defeat. This happens all the time with the best teams. I mean, our 3 or 4 stretch, you could point to 3 or 4 games each of those 3 seasons where, it's a coin flip, and you absolutely had to do the pristine correct thing in the right moment. Something situationally, either special teams, defense, or offense, or it didn't go your way, right? It wasn't just walking through schedules. And I think that's important. I mean, you use the reference here multiple times with the whole Bucs game thing. You do not come back from large deficits without playing great defense. You don't come back just by scoring and then give it back to you and score. It's not make it, take it basketball. You have to stop someone to allow it to happen, right? So it's a collective effort. And it's handling adversity. So I think and that's probably the biggest thing. In-season adversity, the Bengals are a great example of a team that, I was probably part of that sort of chorus in September and early October. They're not protecting well. They're not running the football the way they used to. That may be the end of them, but they righted the ship, and they're doing both those things much better now later in the year when it counts. So I think that's a big part of it. Learning yourself, adjusting, overcoming bumps, and they've done so.
Yeah, that's right. And playing complementary football. They won that game last week without their best pass rusher in Trey Hendrickson and without their best cover corner in Chidobe Awuzie. So coming from you, 3-time Super Bowl champion, very well received. Joe Burrow, you think he solved a complex problem playing against a Buccaneers defense last week and trying to beat the greatness of Tom Brady? I think the equation just got a little bit more difficult. How do you think Joe Burrow will fare against a Bill Belichick defense, who I still think is very much underrated? There are 14 interceptions on the season, tied for second most by any defense in the NFL. 48 sacks by this group, and you can tell us about those edge rushers. They got 2 of them with double-digit sacks, but they rank top 5 at getting to the quarterback. I think this is going to be a complex problem to solve for Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that they haven't been able to string together their sort of core 4 downs for the pass rush situation throughout the course of the season, but they did get them back last week. Christian Barmore, up-and-coming player in the league, has missed a chunk, almost 2 months of time, returns a week ago. Josh Uche, I think he would be that sort of top-of-mind player as young edge guys in the league had he not missed so much time these first couple of seasons. Yeah. But when he's out there, good Lord, I mean, he's just got that thing, his bend, his elusiveness, his explosiveness. He's had a lot of his sacks in 3-man rush situations, or 4 where you're just dropping. So when you can let him go and you don't have to do extra things. And there's a final piece in there, Dietrich Wise. At one point this season, Dietrich was ahead of Matt Judon in sack totals. Wow. It just sort of has swung throughout the group. So they're very, very formidable. Now, from a Bengals perspective, the thing that you would note about the Pats that has this community a little more concerned about how things are going is defensive back depth. So Jack Jones has been this sort of ascendant. Wow, they really hit on a kid from Arizona State here this first year. Played a lot of really great games at boundary corner. Was a turnover machine himself. Yeah, and he's out now. We don't, this is sort of a watch the inactive sort of situation in this market. Jalen Mills as well. So you take out 2 of your top sort of cycling 3 or 4, and it looks different against some teams, not others. And I make that point to say, 2 weeks ago, they do a great job of stopping DeAndre Hopkins. Why? I think they're a team with one so far out in front of the other. It makes it makes any kind of rotations a little more deliberative.
Yeah.
I look at, and then we can even talk about a week ago. I mean, it's another situation where the lead dog is so far out in front. You can game plan for Devontae Adams. Not easy to take away, even when you are doubling him, but they did a better job of making sure that one guy didn't kill him. I put the Bengals in a little bit different situation. It's not to denigrate Chase at all. He's tremendous.
Yeah.
But Higgins and Boyd are there also. And
Ooh,
it's any given week, you might have a 100-yard game out of any of the three of them.
Yeah.
That's what makes it unique when you start talking about issues of secondary depth, because everyone slides a spot ostensibly. So it's going to be a big challenge for them to see who's active and for whomever's there to step up, because what's going on at this 2 and 3 spot is just as important as what's going on at the 1.
And for everyone who's listening, I think what you just described is that it was a secondary win. The top players like Jalen Mills and the rookie Jack Jones was able to play. I was so impressed with Jack Jones. Absolutely loved him. And, all the people here in Cincinnati are familiar with Sauce Gardner, who went nearby to the University of Cincinnati. Well, you and I both know Jack Jones was performing at that same level during his rookie campaign with Sauce Gardner until the injury. And it's just rather unfortunate. Now you're going to be, that depth is going to be tested against a trio of receivers in Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. We hope to get Hayden Hurst back this week, but we've been tested with our wide receiving group, and we've had guys like Trenton Irwin and Trent Taylor who've made plays in this offense for Joe Burrow. And I got to ask you this, because, look, you played on the defensive side of the ball, played a lot of special teams. What the Bengals have been doing a lot of to help their offensive line and cut down on the sack total is Joe Burrow's not lining up really deep in the shotgun. He's about 4 yards deep, Matt, and he's getting the ball out quick. So he changed his depth, which you and I both know puts a lot of stress on the offensive line. By moving up a little bit closer. He will attack the line of scrimmage. If you go flying up the field,
that's it.
He's stepping toward and pressing the line, vision down the field. He's either going to take off or he's going to dump it. His running backs have been great, and Samaje P. Ryan and Joe Mixon at checking it down. He and Tom Brady, in fact, last week checked in at number 1 and number 2 for getting rid of the ball on quick pass plays faster than anyone else. So I think that can really challenge the Patriots secondary and maybe mitigate the good pass rush that they come into games with.
Yeah, so the way to make sure that's not the case, I guess, from a Patriots perspective, is you can't give a chunk on first down. So it can't be second and 4. Can't be second and 4, because second and 4 isn't going to force you into 5 or 7 step drop. So you can go quick game all the way down the field if you get chunks on the ground. And I think that's why it's so imperative, and hasn't been an absolute given for the Patriots throughout the season. There's been great games of run stopping and really poor games of run stopping, where that's basically been the core factor in them not coming out with it. So they're going to have to, it sounds silly. You talk Joe Burrow, we talk all these incredibly important receivers to that offense. But if Mixon or P. Ryan are getting chunks, that's what we'll talk about. It won't be the other thing, right? Because that sets the table for success in the other place. I love that you made the point, though, about the short drop, because I always looked at Burrow a little bit like I looked at Ryan Tannehill, a little bit like Ryan Fitzpatrick. I know is not considered or thought of as a runner, but he was always good, sort of guard to guard, leave down the front porch kind of guy. And it's just intuitive, I guess, sort of should be self-evident. If you start at 4 as opposed to 6, you're 2 yards closer. It's an easier decision to make.
That's right.
You're downhill. You're right downhill when you're sliding and you're getting conversions, and that's a big deal.
And he also will play you that if you're heavy in man coverage and you turn your back to him in coverage, he's going to make you pay, man. This dude plays just heady football. He gets it at so many different levels that you're almost damned if you do, damned if you don't. But before we head to break, I want you to share with our Believe in Bengal podcast listeners here on Bally Sports Ohio, what is the weather like this time of year at Gillette Stadium for those teams that think they're going to come in and just have to play the Patriots? You're kind of fighting 2 opponents sometimes.
You can, but you know what? Cincy, we're Northern Kentucky, Southern Ohio here, so it's right. It's not as if we're having a conversation about one of the South Coast teams. So it might be 15, 20 degrees and what's your difference? Maybe a little more wind. That's kind of a factor you always pay attention to in that particular stadium. But I haven't yet looked. But we don't have some sort of impending storm on the way, so it may not be a big factor.
You also won a ring with the St. Louis Rams. Am I correct?
No, but I would have loved to have gotten it. I got cut from that team, Solomon, and that's how I came to New England. I was there for a cup of coffee during the '99 thing, but then on to New England from there.
Yeah, you were there in '99 as they're making the run. They send you over to the Patriots, but somehow you still worked it out. You still end up with a bunch of bling on both hands. It came out okay. Hey, look, got to ask you this, because Lou Anarumo, Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator, has been so good at giving quarterbacks one thing in the first half, Matt, and giving them something totally different in the second half. It's not lost on me that the Patriots offense, they're only averaging, 20 points a game, 17th in the NFL. Matt Patricia went from running a defense to now calling plays on the offense. And there's been some growing pains between he and the quarterback. I know at times Mac Jones has been frustrated. There's been some new learning for him. I like him as a young quarterback, to be honest with you. But just kind of help us to understand what's going on with this Patriots offense and how might these struggles continue against a defensive coordinator that tends to really make things very complex for veteran quarterbacks, let alone a young guy like Mac Jones.
I think the story of 2022 for the Patriots offense, it has sort of taken a weird, went off the road and has sort of gone wild in the woods kind of thing.
Yeah.
A lot of the conversation has been around Matt Patricia and what offense they were running and his newness to calling plays and flipping sides of the ball. I think that's sort of burying the lead. It's an offense that has three of its offensive tackles on injured reserve. Its other left tackle played right tackle last season, spent 2 of the last 3 weeks missing pregame to just come on the field and start at left tackle and Trent Brown. He was playing because he had no choice but to play. If they didn't, they were going to be putting their guard center to go out the left. It's a hot mess. And I think if you take that circumstance and enter that into the sort of realm of things that any offensive coordinator has to deal with, you're in trouble. I mean, it really limits what you're able to do. They're not going to be a deep drop back team. They're not going to sit back there for 3 and 4 seconds. And the thing that was such a big part of their identity a year ago no longer has been, although last week the Patriots ran for 206 yards on the ground, but they had been a team that could sort of impose their will. That was the identity. Win off play action or win off sort of earning fronts or earning coverages that are more amenable to trying to throw the football. But when you're not running it well for several months, and it's easy to understand how it happens. Damian Harris, was a stud, absolute stud, but he's been in and out of the lineup for quite a bit. Ramondre Stevenson's been amazing, but asking one guy to go wire to wire is usually not an entirety of an offense. They've been really poor in the red zone, and I think when you look at teams that are very competent in the red zone, because the room is shrunk, and we all know that, you got to be able to run it. You got to be able to run it down there. And when you're missing that component and you're not able to protect as well as you'd like to, it just really handcuffs anyone that's trying to call play. So they've been in that circumstance a week ago. It's just, this is the kind of offense I think Cincy will see. You're going to watch tape and you're going to say, man, if they hadn't done this crazy thing, or they hadn't, that overthrow a wide open seam route could hit his head on the goalpost if you catch the ball. If they, execute a sneak on the goal line, silly stuff like this, the notions of rankings and stats and all these kinds of things, they really go out the window if the Patriots capitalize. But it's been an offense that really hasn't taken advantage of the opportunities they've had before them. So it's just one of those teams, like, say, if we're on the other side, we're talking from the Bengals perspective, you'd say, you can't overlook them, because if they ever figure this out, there's something there. They get all healthy and they're all available and they stop shooting themselves in the toe, then they're very formidable. But until then, they've been very untrustworthy because of sort of riding the roller coaster.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Normally, I could sit here and do this show and say, hey, Lou Anarumo is going to tell us, guys, here's the guy we have to take away. We've got to take away a Mike Evans like last week. We've got to take – I don't know who with the Patriots that we say, look, we got to take away this receiver. Here's the guy. And to that extent, because they don't have guys that can break the game wide open. But I can tell you right now, Jacoby Myers, if you go to sleep on him, he'll take you behind the woodshed. Nelson Aguilar, if you go to sleep on him, Matt, he can end up with a big game, and now they're running all of his highlights on SportsCenter. So, help me out here. If you had to take a guy away, who do you take away? Where is Lou Anarumo best maybe focusing his resources and who do they have to really be concerned about?
I don't think you have to take a guy away with the Patriots. I think you have to take an element away. I think it's more important that they cannot establish the run game because if they do, that really changes everything. All these protection issues they've been having, and in saying that, last week was probably one of the best in months. They protected exceptionally well. Opportunities all over the place in the passing game. Didn't play well from the quarterback spot. But I would not want to let them get rolling with the kinds of plays I referenced earlier with the Bengals. You don't want 2nd and 4. You don't want to give chunk plays on the ground, right? You don't want to put them ahead of the count because then they can really hurt you. They're a team that 2 weeks ago against the Cardinals are down their top 2 wide receivers in Devontae Parker and Jacoby Myers, and then their top 2 backs in Ramondre Stevens and Damian Harris. If you're talking from a Patriots perspective, you're usually game planning around those 4. Now those 4 are absent. So they've been trying to make it work, but it has been a hard scrabble because of just sort of, glue and bubblegum kind of thing. So I think we'll all be watching as they do in this market, those inactive lists and who's up and available. Devontae, if he's back, changes things because he's a dynamic player. He's not an over-the-top guy, but he can win one-on-one against just about anyone. You mentioned the notion of not being able to take the top off. They've got a very interesting player in Marcus Jones, who's sort of their version of a Devin Hester kind of thing. Where they'll also notice from a defensive standpoint, you see that guy on the field, when you're studying game plan, you've said, okay, ears up, something's going on. So he's been an explosive player for them. Absolutely. That's
right. He's a guy that can flat out run. When you see him, he's going deep, or he's going to catch it in front of you and then take it deep. He can do either one. This guy's fast as he wants to be. Also, Ramondre Stevenson, the running back for the New England Patriots, he's a guy that the Bengals have to keep an eye on. Over 900 yards already rushing so far this season. He's averaging 5 yards per carry entering action week 16 for the Cincinnati Bengals game. Matt, I got to ask you about this because 1 week the Cincinnati Bengals are taking on the GOAT, Tom Brady, and they survived it. And now our young coach, who we love a lot, Zach Taylor, has got to play chess against the mastermind himself, Bill Belichick. That's a lot to put on a guy. You got to go beat Tom Brady 1 week, and the next week you got to go take on Bill Belichick. And I guess it beats the alternative, taking them both on at the same time. Right. So tell me, what are some of the things that you know about your former coach, Bill Belichick, that he would be thinking about going up against a young offensive-minded coach like Zach Taylor?
Well, I think you have to look at context and circumstances around the team, who you're getting right now. And I think Coach Belichick is the best there ever was, and he's also sort of guiding a ship with a lot of wounded animals, a lot of cornered guys, a lot of guys that want to prove that they're better than what they've been performing like. So what they've always been really good at is turning things around on a singular game plan that doesn't necessarily speak to arc of season, but in any moment, can they put together a plan for these 60 plays of each side of the ball that can hurt the other side? Yeah. Now, can they live up to the performance? That's been the issue. Can they stop shooting themselves in the foot? I mean, we all saw the wild end of that game with the Raiders. I mean, in the event that you do that, who cares if it's Bill Belichick or whomever, head coach? Players have to execute in critical moments. But I think that's probably the biggest thing. Bill's going to put something out there that will be challenging, that will be mentally challenging and physically challenging. He'll work the best that he has with the pieces he's working with. But are they going to be able to execute it? Are there things that Zach's going to be able to take advantage of himself?
Yeah, I think that'll be very interesting. There's no doubt about it. Look, I can tell you this, Zach Taylor, remember he had coached under Sean McVay, comes from that Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, a lot of the West Coast principles, but he really has given Joe Burrow a lot of latitude to operate within the offense. And you got to know this about Zach Taylor. He was once the Offensive Player of the Year in the Big 12 Conference as a quarterback at Nebraska. So you and I both know, if you have a coach who used to play quarterback and then he gets himself a young, talented player like a Joe Burrow, you're going to coach that guy to say, here is the things that I would do with him that I wish someone would have did with me, right? Right. Kind of like, and you're going to give them everything. You're going to allow them to run, because you know this, when you're going up against some of the best defenses, they force you to have to go to your second and your third and sometimes your fourth option. So you better have one. And your third, fourth, and fifth option better be a good option. And that's what I think the Bengals do as well as anyone. I think he knows, and I remember watching, you remember Zach Taylor was in with the Rams when the Patriots beat the Rams in the Super Bowl during that 2018 run. That was a game where, remember, I think the Patriots scored 7 points of 7-3. It was a 3-3 ball game at halftime. And I just thought it was one of the great coaching games that I saw from Bill Belichick defensively, derailing a high-powered offense like the Rams. And that's what concerns me the most going into a game like this, Matt.
Yeah, I believe the old stat, Solomon, was actually there have been 2 instances in NFL Super Bowl history where a team was held the most below sort of their average for season. So yeah, they were a nearly 30-point per game team throughout the regular season. Smoking were the Rams, and they hold them down to 3 points. It's just sort of taking that much of a chunk multi-score off of what you're used to.
Incredible.
It's just simply unheard of, right? So I do think, though, when you're facing them now, the challenge you have, and I think last week's actually a terrific example of it. Matt Judon, you're going to be the offensive tackle. You play right tackle, maybe left because they move him around. Yeah. And you're studying film all week. You're working on, this is my edge guy. Here's what he does. Here's how I'll counter him. Here's my approach. And Matt ends up dropping half the game. Right? Wow. So he ends up, over guards and dropping out, and he's just used a different way for that particular week. And that's just the thing you have to be ready for. You may spend all week preparing for something you don't even do in the game. And I think that's what it always is the challenge when facing Coach Belichick's teams.
Hey, look, I think our tackles and Lyle Collins and Jonah Williams, they got their work cut out. Josh Uche, people should know about him. This is a young up-and-coming star in the NFL, already with double-digit sacks with 3 games remaining. And everyone should know about Matt Judon, having come to the Patriots from the Baltimore Ravens. We remember him in the AFC North. All he's done is gotten better since he's gone to New England. Hey, before we let you go, Matt, I want to thank you for joining us on the show. Tell us more about your company, Rub Smoke Love, and where we can find some of your products.
That's it. I have samples, so I love to do this sort of on the screen here. So this is Gold Bark and Beefcake.
I like it.
12 years at Nesson, New England Sports Network. I left this spring and started a barbecue rub company, and we're you can find it at rubsmokelove.com. Beefcake is more beef, steak, ribs, all those kinds of things. Anything that's beef-based is perfect for. Gold Bark is more of a chicken, barbecue, any kind of doing thighs, doing any kind of thing it's a pig preparation. So you can find out online at rubsmokelove.com. We're in grocery stores up here in the Northeast at all the big Ys and a bunch of butchers. So I'm loving life. I'm doing something a little different. It's a nice twist.
I like it. Rubsmokelove.com. I like that. Great. It just sticks right in the brain. You say it once, I got it.
That's the idea.
Hey, Matt, we really appreciate you joining us on the show. Great information. We wish you all the best of luck with selling your products and with your broadcasting career. You do a great job, my man. I want to thank you for joining us right here on the Believe in Bengal podcast, delivered by 828 Logistics. Everyone, you can continue to watch us right here on Bally Sports Ohio. We'll see you next time.